Today's presentation is on Joann Heinrich Pestalozzi. Pestalozzi was born January 12, 1746 in Zurich, Switzerland. He would become a philosopher, inspire the progressive pedagogy in education, publish many educational books and resources, and found institutions across Switzerland before he died in February 1827 at the age of 81. Pestalozzi lived his early life in Zurich in a house with his parents, siblings, and their maid. His father died when Pestalozzi was only 6 years old. His grandfather, a clergyman, would mentor him in his absence. On trips with his grandfather, Pestalozzi encountered impoverished families where illiteracy was a common problem. He walked the streets and saw the poor being taken advantage of in factories. He would eventually dedicate his life to eradicating illiteracy in Switzerland. Despite being educated as a clergyman, Pestalozzi was influenced by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a philosopher, to pursue a career in politics and law. Rousseau was a romanticist interested in politics and education who influenced the Enlightenment era and the French Revolution. Pestalozzi said that Rousseau increased his desire to promote the welfare and happiness of the people. In the 1800s, Switzerland was a rocky place. The Age of Enlightenment was in full swing. New ideas were springing from the minds of philosophers, and age-old systems of government were being brought into question. Among these thinkers was Rousseau, a writer and composer. His first influential work, Emile, would begin to change thoughts about education. However, with great change came revolution. The French army declared Switzerland an ally and removed the democratic government. There was resistance, and reform did not come easy. Although France expanded Swiss borders and brought in new great thinkers and their ideas, there were new taxes, centralization, hostility to religion, war, and the loss of democracy. When Pestalozzi was around the age of 18, many great thinkers were arrested anyway, including Rousseau, because their ideas were perceived as dangerous to French centralization. As a result, the Helvetic Society, a patriotic Swiss reform group, was founded, and Pestalozzi became an active member. While he managed to expose corruption and help his fellow philosophers, his quarrels with law enforcement and the government ruined his hopes for a legal career. The Helvetic Society proved to be a great influence on Pestalozzi and his work. It was formed in 1762 with goals including democratic reform and universal education. It began with 25 members, led by Isaac Iselin. Iselin studied history and politics at the universities of Basel and Göttingen, becoming the secretary of the Republic of Basel. He wrote several volumes on politics, one of which brought together many like-minded philosophers who would form the Helvetic Society. Pestalozzi was introduced to them by Johann Bodmer, his former professor. The group studied Enlightenment-era texts and discussed ideas on education, politics, history, and religion. Many of their ideas would later be included in the Swiss Federal Constitution in 1848. Pestalozzi himself contributed to the group's newsletter, Der RNR. This publication would be the one to ruin the group's reputation with authorities due to its critical and even radical nature. After Pestalozzi's political flop, a friend from the Helvetic Society recommended that he become a farmer, so Pestalozzi settled down after buying several acres of land. He married Anna Schultes, who bore him his first son, Jean-Jacques Pestalozzi, named after Rousseau. Unfortunately, the farmland was unsuitable for growth, and he could not profit from it. He turned back to his first passion, helping the poor. Having been poor most of his own life, he wanted to teach people how to help themselves. So he converted his farmhouse into a schoolhouse named Neuhof. Although he had the support of friends and family, the school failed in 1779, only keeping the property and house for his family to live in. Reduced to poverty, his family connections abandoned him. Isaac Iselin encouraged Pestalozzi to keep writing during this time of poverty. Although none of his early writing increased his notoriety, they helped form ideas that would later become his greatest theories. His first success was in the story of Leonard and Gertrude. The format was heavily inspired by Rousseau's Emile, making a point through the story of a fictional character. The book detailed the formation of an educational system in government, starting with a mother named Gertrude. She taught her children, then a school teacher adopted her methods, next a clergyman, and finally a politician, allowing education to reach all people. The first volume was very successful, so he continued his writing. During a trip to Germany, Johann Fichte saw great value in Pestalozzi's ideas. He encouraged him to write about the development of human nature. However, after spending several years writing inquiries into the course in nature and the development of the human race, its publishing went largely unnoticed. Afterwards, Pestalozzi stopped writing. In 1798, things started to move and shake in Switzerland once again. Serfdom was abolished, the French began their conquest, and, most importantly, Pestalozzi decided to become a teacher again. He wrote and submitted a plan to the Swiss Minister of Arts and Sciences. After it was accepted, Pestalozzi was put in charge of a government newspaper while they decided on a site for him. In the meantime, Pestalozzi was asked to help an orphanage of children affected by the French invasion. Having been his dream to help the poor, Pestalozzi said he would help immediately. While helping at the orphanage, he did not only teach. Helping with the children's personal issues made Pestalozzi realize the importance of cultivating activity of the mind, not just producing a child for industry. He would use this insight when developing his theories. After some time, Pestalozzi was relocated by the government to a school. Here he continued to apply what he had discovered at the orphanage, aided by new friends and books. Upon inspection of his progress, authorities praised him. He had taught new students to read and write in less than a year. He was promoted, opened a new institute, and was joined by new colleagues and wrote down many of his methods and theories on education. People from all over Switzerland came to see the school. It grew and grew, but Pestalozzi still felt that he was missing something. He wanted to educate the poor, not just those that could afford it. He lettered the government, prompting them to turn his school into a national institution. His staff would receive salaries, and his works would be published as textbooks. After these successes, he moved his family to the Institute from Neuhof. In 1804, the government was put in jeopardy by the reign of Napoleon. Reform caused issues for Pestalozzi's budding educational system, and so he traveled to Paris. However, he would return to no avail. The government seized Bergdorf, and Pestalozzi relocated to Yverdon. In 1805, Yverdon opened its doors with great promise. Many people remembered Pestalozzi for his work at Bergdorf and traveled there. Even educators sought to study and learn there. The school developed a large curriculum teaching multiple languages, mathematics, reading, writing, history, and even choir across all age groups. The school would last for 20 years, Pestalozzi's longest-lasting project. Unfortunately, the school never became a state institution and closed in 1825 because of a lack of money. Pestalozzi returned to Neuhof, where he published his last work, Pestalozzi's Swan Song, and passed away. Pestalozzi is remembered for his emphasis on a child's personality and character. He centered his curriculum on the child and their individuality. He wanted to develop their interests, abilities, and autonomy instead of relying on an outward authority or industry. He based his philosophy on spheres of life, family, self, nation, and inner sense. He believed that if you educated a child to satisfy their basic needs, the last sphere of inner sense would unlock and result in an inner peace and belief in God. His lessons revolved around objects and observation. For example, he would first introduce the students to glass. He would hand them a piece of glass and ask them what they noticed about it. What does it feel like? What does it look like? Are there any things like it? When the students answered these questions themselves, they became involved in their own education. It developed a desire to learn, to understand their environment. It was different from other methods at the time, namely having students memorize material instead of having them discover it themselves. The success of these lesson plans would bring people from all over to see his work and read his manuscripts. And when they left, they brought his influence. His influence would spread through his students, educators, and observers, reaching across Europe. Albert Einstein himself attended an institution influenced by Pestalozzi. The ideas of self-activity and individual thought are said to have influenced Einstein's own thought experiments. Friedrich Froebel, the father of kindergarten, applied Pestalozzi and Rousseau's teachings to his class, a garden for students where they can grow. Froebel would later bring these ideas to America, spreading Pestalozzi's influence further. Charles and Elizabeth Mayo would bring his ideas to Britain, founding institutes for the education of teachers. Even in modern times, his thoughts and ideas have inspired the formation of progressive education. Pestalozzi had an effect on education that will last forever. His influence has spread wide, teaching of development, observation, and sympathy. The work of his life is not on this earth, written down in old books, served in old buildings. It is the principles he practiced while he lived, the principles that will inspire educators for years to come.